Okay, good evening. This is John Bushko again, and that's a picture of my father in a YMCA room in 1938 um, in Washington, D.C., where he met my mother and they married in 1940. There's a piano in the room, which I think is very interesting. Very nice, interesting room that he had to live in back then as a salesman for Imperial Glass. Um, just run through a few other pictures and get on to the topic. That's a picture of my model railroad layout in 2016. It's supposed to be on another planet that's sort of between two mountain ranges. Those are records, and today my record collection, my vinyl records, was discarded through 123 junk at Extra Space. So I don't have that anymore. Um, and I'll get into the significance of that, why I had to do it. Some pictures of the extra space area, and then some artwork from Washington. I was in the city Sunday night. That's a Sonesta Hotel. There's a Sonesta Hotel in Austin I stayed in, very similar chain. That's a park where they had an AIDS quilt, but I got there too late. They had taken it down at 22nd Street and P Street. So that's where it had been. I think there's going to be another one this weekend. That's First Baptist Church last Sunday, and more scenes from the. That's an old Royal typewriter case from that was in the junk that we discarded today. Some furniture, and it broke as we took it out. This old wood furniture tends to break from the 1940s. I think that was made in the 40s. That's from Ohio, that canister. And then my Do Ask Do Tell books. We found about 7 cartons of books and Mother Sterling Silver. Now, 123 Junk gives some of this stuff away, so I hope they can find a charity to give some of this away to. Um, and the reason I've, for the extra space storage, it was costing close to $400 a month. And the estate could pay for most of it because most of it was her stuff, but some of it I had to pay for. And we put it there when I moved there in 2017 in October from cleared out the house. Intended to take it down maybe to 2020, and we had the pandemic and I never got around to it. So, but the reason this is kind of interesting is that, yeah, the record collection, I had about probably 400 I had about 10 boxes of vinyl records, and I collected records as a teenager and as a young adult, and then switched over to compact discs around 1985 and gradually collected those. I still have all my CDs in the room, and they're right here in this condo. Um, and I still have most of my books, but we got rid of the vinyl record collection. The very fact that I had a record collection meant a lot to me. It was kind of a source of identity. It gave me some prestige with friends that were in the music, and some of them I went over to their houses who also had collections, and we would share records and so forth. One high school friend in the Science Honor Society, we did that, and then a friend at First Baptist Church that was their audio engineer for 50 years until he passed away in 2011. He had a larger record collection than I did. And I actually tried to see if we could give the vinyl collection away, but no, there were no takers. So um, nobody responded. So I part with something that was a source of my identity, feeling like a public person back in my high school and college days, as tumultuous as they were, and young adult days, all the way into the 80s to the 1980s, when I would be 40, 1985, I'd be 42. So it was a very important part of my life for a long time. I took piano 12 years, from third grade to 12th grade, so that's like 9 years, and played in festivals, got ratings, played in recitals. I don't remember practicing a lot. I mean, I remember it, but I even remember the Tom Thumb March and teaching the little fingers to play, and I remember the Sherwood music course later. But and the salesman that came to present it and everything, but I don't remember, and I remember the piano salesman and so forth. The reason I wanted a piano suddenly in third grade is that we had after school religious teaching back in 1951. You could do that in public schools, and they did an exercise called music art, and they played classical music, and you drew what you thought it brought remind you. And to me, it reminded me of the ending of a war. And I found out over the years I had a very good ear for remembering, identifying classical music, and only hearing it a few times. I can recognize an enormous number of pieces. Um, and the other thing about piano is if you're going to do it as a career, you have to be absolutely dedicated to it, or to be any instrument. And most other instruments, other than organ, you have to play in an orchestra or in a group. And that's enormously difficult to get into, an enormously demanding way of life to play an instrument in a symphony orchestra, but we depend on it. And just, like I got to be a B or an A player, borderline 2000 player in chess, but I never was good enough to be professional. You have to pick one thing and be good at it if you're going to make a living at it, or you're going to be known for it professionally. That's the only thing. You have to be so good that you can be a leader in the field. Otherwise, you're revert back to a non-famous person, I guess. But so I didn't have the focus that other people had on one thing, given the kind of youth I had. But one of the things when I mentioned the 1, 2, 3 junk, one of the things I did want to mention was the book inventory. Well, I'll also just mention there were a couple of other things. I showed you that my picture from my father. There was some other family or old family stuff. Here's a diary of a relative of mine from the early 1900s. You can see she wrote hand wrote a diary. I didn't even know that was in there. But again, the 3 books I found there were I probably have about 100 of them of the books here at home. There are some hard copies of the third book, the 2014 book. We have some of the second book, which was inspired by 9/11. And of course, the first one. The first one actually had 2 printings. This is the original printing at Signature Printing in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and that ran out, but I have like 2 of them here. But I found one in the but if you look at the Amazon link, if you go to the Amazon link, which I can give you in the notes, you'll find that the Amazon link doesn't have current copies of the print on demand for this anymore. It doesn't have the print on demand for this. It has only old copies of the original printing, and there's been some kind of confusion. And the Barnes and Noble does have it, but the Barnes and Noble only has ebooks for the other 2. And the Amazon has ebooks for all 3 of them. The ebooks are much cheaper, so you can use those. I'll give you the links in the description today. But if you want to get a copy, particularly of the first book, you can certainly email me. I'll give you the address in the notes and the email address, and I'll just tell you what the cost would be shipping. It'll probably be pretty reasonable, because I have a lot of copies to get over. I'd say maybe $10 for a physical copy, maybe a little bit more for the hardbound, um, and plus the shipping costs and just a check or something. But you can contact me by email, and I can't really run a retail operation. I mean, from a condo, I don't really have enough scale that I can do that. I'd have to have a storefront or something, and I'm not in a position to do that anymore. What may put me in the position, as I've told you in previous um, videos, is that I'm planning a fourth book. I'm not sure if I'm going to use my pen name, Bill, or if I'm going to use my legal name, John W. Bushka. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue using Do As to Tell as a mark, or I'm going to use something else. But I'll try to scale up to make it very easy for people to get copies, either from me or from, from the major platforms when the time comes. I would say by the end of the year, it should be in pretty good shape. I discussed it last week, what I was planning, and pretty soon I'll discuss the outline of the book, kind of how I set it up, and then how I'll set up references to where there are stories you could extract to make movies and to make extract screenplays, and where some frameworks I use. I'm very familiar with Tyler Mowry's practical screenwriting frameworks. I've been in his writer's room and everything. I use those to analyze my stories, and I'll have some kind of facility online. It might be on my Google Drive with permission or something, but I'll have some way to get it, some templates for screens. Of course, I have the short film um, screenplay that I presented in December online. I'm going to be trying to see if I can get interest in that. A 30-minute short film of my actual expulsion from William and Mary. So I have that also to bring in. And all of this will be laid out in a way that is clear and easier to follow when it's ready, which probably wouldn't be until early 2026. So I got about 6 more months of hard work to do on this. Um, I just wanted to also say that if I covered everything, um, yeah, just about the political climate. My own, I'm one of the things about this getting rid of the extra space today, storage and getting rid of stuff that I might have had an attachment to. Yeah, I'm 81. I'm probably in the last Harmon Circle story of my life, and I need to prepare for the end. I think to have an honorable end. I should do that, and I should be prepared to leave the world honorably. And that means certain things. It means one of the things I've been very insistent on, I can't let others speak for me. I don't join things. I don't join other people's causes and then let that be what I did. And that's kind of a problem prospectively when you start out your life, but at the end of your life, you don't want, I don't want to have just been somebody's follower. I know that gets into religious ideas too. Um, but I sort of think there are things that are, it's appropriate for me to scale some things down, drive less. I'm not going to buy another car, even though I got 100,000 miles on this one and I've had trouble with it unless it's wrecked or something, because, I could have a stroke the next day and lose the right to drive it. It's not smart for me to drive it. It would be smarter for me to use public transportation more, to learn to use the buses here more. Um, It'd be to learn to do a lot of things differently, use trains more instead of flying, even to change a lot of in my last years. That would be appropriate. It's also appropriate to, not to just go to things I used to go to check up on them if I'm not really going to participate, to be more restrained. And I know this is Pride weekend and everything, and I'll be going to some things this weekend, but like everybody else. But generally, I'm not going to social gatherings that I can't follow up on. Um, and you have to start where you are to determine what your moral choices in life are, I think, and then you work back. but then you realize some of your choices are choices you probably should have been making a lot sooner than you do now. And my views on some things have changed. I do think I do think there is an afterlife, and I think there is a structure of beings that, I think reincarnation, a lot of us probably do reincarnate. And that we have souls. Not everyone does, but I think some of us have souls and have been here before. And it's important when you leave to leave honorably, or I may not want to be here again if I don't leave honorably. And that means certain things. I don't want my life to be bargained for after some kind of incident, kidnapping or something like that, some kind of international incident. I think that's kind of in my own feelings, that's kind of dishonorable. There are certain ideas I have. Um, but I don't join things. I don't raise money for other people. I don't I don't attract attention. I don't let other people tell me how to be, how to have publicity or how to be famous. I don't let other people tell me what I should support publicly in order to attract, make people want to follow me or something. I don't do things that way. And that means that's very important to me. The independence, particularly as I get older. But I do think that I do think morality is mostly an individual matter of the choices you make, not of what identities you have. And I've always thought that, but that can mean facing some very hard things. If you want to be a public person, you should have to be accountable, have some way of being accountable for the effect you get. Oh, by the way, let me get out of the way. You can see I do compose music. I mentioned my career. There's some music on the piano just over there. I just wanted to mention that. And I'd like to be public for the music, by the way. But if you want to be public, it's better to have other people depending on you. And the most straightforward way to do that is to have children in a normal family. And that's getting very difficult, and it's also true that what you do and the morality of these, even the gay rights before we got into the gender stuff, um, we're seeing concern people revert back to tribalism with accelerationism. You're seeing a lot of people giving up on the world being able to deal with its problems and feeling like our civilization's going to end. The normal day, we keep going. You see the traffic every day. Life keeps going. Even most of us are not even, if we don't have a direct connection to immigration, are not that concerned about affected by Trump yet. But the acceleration is the wanting to of the rich to secure things for themselves and bunker down, and maybe this kind of cult of prepperism and survivalism and wanting to be the one that survived. And there are people that would like to get rid of democracy, have a sort of a techno monarchy again. I forgot the name of the person that's the well known for that. But anyway, maybe have a society that doesn't, you maybe have a society of city states, sort of like, you know, um, the Greek city states. Um, or sort of like Singapore. That's what I was thinking. Sort of like Singapore is, which is an independent state, and have more barter within it, and not depend on money as much. Have people be much more cohesive. But that's the kind of thing that makes the birth rate important and makes procreation important. That is contributing anti-gay attitudes, which was before, and that's coming back in a lot of places on the right. That's apart from the gender issues that I've talked about. So that's something I'm very concerned about, the accelerationism that you're seeing that internationally. You're seeing Putin back in 2014 when he seized Crimea, was a small thing. It's part of Russia, but it's gotten bigger with the war now and all this nationalism and the glory of his country and all this kind of stuff. And you're seeing other forms of that. Well, yeah, the conflict over Gaza and everything. You're seeing this show up in various forms of fights between religion. The the many set some parts of the Islamic world are very against the West because of its values, its individualistic values, which tempt people away from being able to raise family and procreate. That's one of the reasons why the modesty rules in the Islamic world and women being covered all the time is so important, is so that men will remain interested in their marriages. I guess that's one of the reasons. Um, so I just, this accelerationism, yeah, it seems to be, even though it hasn't affected me much yet, it seems to be a very serious threat. It seems like that's the way Elon Musk is behaving. I mean, maybe he'll take us to Mars. Maybe he's right. Maybe we'll build O'Neill cylinders at Lagrange points and live in them, but you would have to have an authoritarian government to live in an O'Neill cylinder. And I wrote a screenplay about that called Second Epiphany. I think I've talked about that before. Or, if you had to move to Proxima B, if you had to move to another planet, you probably would find an authoritarian system living on another planet. If you lived on Mars, I think it would be a very authoritarian government. So I think you can see why in the future, why democracy is, some people are questioning it. So that's what I had for today. This is a big deal for me to give up, at least to part with something, the record collection that was a very big part of my life at one time and attached, connected to other things. But I just wanted to show that all to you today. And we'll get back to the organization of my new books and I'm talking and the ideas in it and how it tracks to different periods of my life and everything. And I do thank you for listening.